So to begin the process of building the orange feathers on the breast of the Kingfisher, we're starting with the same base tone as we used on the orange cheek patch. That's the Tangerine pencil. Again, stroking on the colour in the direction that the feathers would lie, and putting in an initial light base layer. Now, as you may have noticed on the project page for this drawing, I've put some colour swatches, approximate colours to the ones that I've used from the Polychromos range, to give you an opportunity to select a colour that corresponds as closely as you can with the ones that I'm using, even if you happen to have pencils produced by a different manufacturer. It's not absolutely essential that you go out and buy new pencils to do this. So if you have pencils that you like to use, then if you can come up with colours that approximately match the ones that I'm using, they will be fine for working your way through this drawing. One important thing to remember is that this project, along with all the others, is essentially about learning the techniques of how to use the pencil, how to blend, how to build shape, form, create highlights and shadows. Whether or not your colour is absolutely a perfect match doesn't matter. That can be changed at a later date if you're using a different pencil and it doesn't quite match up with what you're seeing on your reference or on this video. Once you've got the techniques in place and you're more comfortable and confident using the pencils, then there's no reason at all why you can't perhaps purchase some of the corresponding ones that I use, and using the same techniques gradually build a finished piece that you're pleased with and that more readily matches these colours. Colours can be changed just by purchasing a new pencil. The techniques can only be achieved by practice. Whatever sort of pencil you use, that practice is always valuable. So having put in my initial layer of Tangerine, I'm using the burnt sienna pencil to indicate some of the colour variations on the breast. The feathers that flow down the breast of the bird go in groups, and quite often you'll see on reference photographs the lines similar to the ones that I'm introducing now, which essentially is a shadow, if you like, as you get groups of feathers overlapping each other as you move down from the head to the tail of the bird. So I've used some of that burnt sienna just to indicate where there might be variations in that colour. The burnt sienna is quite a strong brown, and what I want is an overall orange appearance to the Kingfisher's breast. So now, having put the burnt sienna detail patches in, I'm coming back in, this time with a light orange. This is unifying the Tangerine and burnt sienna layers beneath, making those darker sections a little less obvious and unifying all the colour. You'll see what I'm doing now, as I frequently do, hesitating every now and again while I compare my drawing at the stage that I've reached with the reference that I'm working from, and where I feel I need to make some changes, coming back in, working over areas that I've already added colour to make those adjustments. All the time the colour's getting richer, the texture of the paper is gradually being obscured. And when we were drawing the wing, I mentioned the fact that some of the breast feathers will overlap where that folded wing is pushed in close to the body. So now I'm using the Peacock blue just to reinforce the visible areas of blue feathers between some of those sections of orange. See, I'm alternating from blue to orange. Gradually creating that soft overlapping edge. Now this lower portion of the bird's body is going to be in much deeper shadow. So once more, I'm using the burnt sienna to make that change in colour, and importantly creating a shadow using variations of the colours of the bird rather than using grey. There are times when using a grey pencil to create a shadow is a perfectly valid choice. But in areas like this, where you're dealing with feathers that are particularly strong and vibrant, maintaining the use of a varying combination of the actual colour itself to create those shadows is much more effective. Now moving on to the small section of the primary feathers, which you can see just protruding from beneath the large secondaries that we completed in the previous video. And the leading edge of each of these feathers has a bright blue stripe that runs down the length of the feather. So my first job is to put that in using the light phthalo blue, and then using the Payne's grey I'm putting in the central vein of each of these feathers before moving on to complete the darker brown portion of the feathers, which is much more visible. So to do this I'm using the Bistre brown pencil again, and as I fill in the first layer on this part of each feather, I'm going to leave a pale crescent of paper showing through, which is there to indicate the edge of each of these feathers. With a nice sharp pencil, working very close to the previous brown section but not quite touching it. And this suggests the edge of the feathers. The feathers themselves on their very edge are incredibly thin. And light shows through them, and a pale edge can often, like this, can often very successfully suggest that structure. And now I'm effectively repeating that process again with each of the colours, but this time using the Payne's grey over the top of the Bistre brown, making it darker, not losing the brown colour but increasing the depth of tone. Along the outside edge of each of the feathers, nice fine line of Payne's grey just to indicate that edge a little better, perhaps suggest a very narrow cast shadow on the adjacent feather. Now those feathers are in, I can bring the light orange back in and move that colour right up against the feathers. Nice and tight, so there aren't any gaps showing white paper where we want there to be shadow or detail in the drawing. Working now to define more of the shadow area. on this top section of the Kingfisher's orange breast, there is a wash of the blue colour that the other feathers are comprised of, and it just sort of stretches forward onto the upper part of the breast. So now I'm gently putting that in, reinforcing the areas around it with some more peacock blue. But this small patch is a combination of the orange and blue, so that was the reason why I put the initial orange layer in. I needed that to be underneath, showing through the blue that will be applied later. And this little notch at the top of the folded wing has a darker shadow which it casts onto the surrounding body of the bird. And because of the angle that this kingfisher is sitting, we've got a small portion of the shoulder and the wing on the far side which is visible. Only just, but it's important that it's included. Because it's on the illuminated side of the bird as well, so it will automatically be a bit paler in colour. So the light phthalo blue base is put in, and then I'll work gently over it with the peacock blue. So that it works, ties in nicely with the detail on the left hand side that we've already completed. Now the central feathers that run down the back of the bird, the electric blue, that any of you who have seen a kingfisher will recognise as you see it flying away from you along a river or across a lake. That has a fairly indistinct edge, so I've created that sort of comb effect on both sides. When I put the blue in the next stage, I'll be drawing that into those spaces that I've left. So just adding a few more Payne's grey details to show where those secondary feathers lie. And completing this section, this video stage. As I mentioned just now, in the next stage we'll move on to creating that wonderful electric blue stripe down the back of the bird. Just doing a little bit of touching up now with the eraser pencil, and we're all done.